Imagine coming home one day expecting to be greeted by your beloved dog, only to find him missing, not because he ran away, but because your HOA president stole him. That's exactly what happened to me. HOA Karen decided that my golden retriever, Max, didn't fit the community aesthetic. So she took matters into her own hands, literally. Watch to the end to find out what our crazy HOA Karen did. Talking about crazy, why haven't you subscribed to our channel yet? We want to grow our community, and depends on you to do so. I'd always known that my HOA president, Karen, was a control freak. From the moment I moved into Brookwood Estates, she had been nothing but a thorn in my side. She had an obsession with maintaining the community image, which was just her fancy way of micromanaging people's lives. She fined my neighbor $200 for having a non-regulation mailbox, made another resident repaint their house twice because she didn't like the shade of beige they chose, and even threatened to remove someone's patio furniture because it wasn't elegant enough. But I never thought she'd go after my dog. Max was my best friend, a goofy, lovable golden retriever who wouldn't hurt a fly. Every morning, he'd sit by the window, watching the joggers go by, wagging his tail at everyone. The neighborhood kids loved him, always stopping by to pet him when I took him on walks. So when I received an HOA warning letter about Max, I laughed. It read, "Dear homeowner, your pet does not align with the community aesthetic standards as outlined in the HOA guidelines. Dogs over 50 pounds are considered disruptive to the neighborhood's visual harmony. You are required to relocate the animal within 7 days or face escalating fines." I was dumbfounded. Since when did an HOA have a say in what dog breeds people could have? I checked the bylaws, and of course, there was nothing about dog sizes or breeds. I wasn't about to let Karen bully me into giving up Max. So I did what any reasonable homeowner would do. I ignored her. Big mistake. 2 days later, I was at work when I got a motion alert from my backyard security camera. I pulled up the footage, and my blood ran cold. Karen was in my yard. Inside my fenced-in yard. She was unlocking Max's leash from his dog run. He wagged his tail, thinking she was there to play, but she grabbed his collar and dragged him out through the side gate. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I immediately called my neighbor Mark, who worked from home. "Dude," I said, trying to stay calm. "Karen just broke into my yard and took Max. I need you to check her house now." Mark, who had his own history with Karen, didn't even hesitate. "I'm on it." 15 minutes later, he called me back. "She has him," he whispered. "Max is in her backyard. She put him in a gated kennel." I felt pure rage. Karen had stolen my dog and was keeping him hostage. I left work immediately. The whole drive home, my hands were shaking. Who the hell did this woman think she was? When I pulled into my driveway, I didn't even bother parking properly. I stormed straight to Karen's house and banged on her door. She opened it with the smuggest smile I'd ever seen. "Oh, hello," she said, feigning innocence. "What seems to be the problem?" "You know damn well what the problem is," I snapped. "Where is Max?" Karen folded her arms. "Your pet was in violation of community standards. I have relocated him to a more appropriate environment." I was speechless. She was talking like this was a completely normal thing to do. "You stole my dog," I said through gritted teeth. "Where is he?" She sighed dramatically. "He is being held until we can arrange for his removal from the neighborhood. He's not a car, Karen. You can't just take someone's dog." She smirked. "Actually, as HOA president, I have the authority to enforce rules when a resident refuses to comply. You'll receive a notice on where you can retrieve him once we've finalized the process." She turned to close the door. I stuck my foot in it. "If you don't give me my dog back right now, I will call the police." Karen laughed. "Oh, please. The HOA has more authority in this neighborhood than the police. They won't do anything." That's when I pulled out my phone and held it up. "They will when they see the footage of you trespassing into my yard." Karen's smugness disappeared instantly. For the first time, she looked nervous. I was ensuring compliance," she stammered. "The community has a right to maintain its standards." I stepped forward. "Let me be crystal clear, Karen. You have exactly 5 minutes to return my dog, or I will make sure you spend the night in a jail cell." Karen froze. For a second, I thought she was actually going to comply. But then her expression darkened. If you think this is over, she hissed, you're wrong. She slammed the door in my face. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and did exactly what I said I'd do. I called the police. But what I didn't know at the time was that when the officers arrived, they wouldn't just find Max in her backyard. They'd find something much worse. I stood outside Karen's door, my fists clenched, heart racing, and pure rage coursing through me. She had just stolen my dog, openly admitted it, and had the audacity to act like she was above the law. But this wasn't going to be one of her usual HOA power trips. I called 911, my voice steady but dripping with anger. I need police assistance immediately. My HOA president just trespassed onto my property and stole my dog. I have security footage of her doing it, and I know exactly where she's keeping him. The dispatcher asked a few quick questions before assuring me that officers were on their way. I wasn't going to wait quietly. Mark and a few other neighbors had gathered nearby, already aware that something was going down. Word spread fast when Karen was involved in drama. Dude, she's lost her mind, Mark muttered. She really thinks she can just confiscate a dog. She thinks she owns the whole neighborhood, I said, pacing. This time, she's crossed the line. Another neighbor, Jessica, who had butted heads with Karen before, walked up with her arms crossed. Did you see what she did last week? I turned to her. What do you mean? Jessica hesitated. I wasn't going to say anything before, but I saw her take another dog. My stomach dropped. What? I asked, my voice suddenly hoarse. She nodded. About a week ago, I saw her luring a small white dog into her backyard. I thought maybe it was a stray, but now I'm not so sure. Mark's face paled. Wait, are you talking about Mrs. Henderson's dog? My breath caught in my throat. Mrs. Henderson was an elderly woman who lived alone at the end of the block. Her little Maltese, Charlie, had been missing for days. She had put up flyers, knocked on doors, and even filed a missing pet report. I suddenly felt sick. Karen hadn't just stolen my dog. She had done this before. Before I could process what that meant, the police arrived. 2 officers stepped out, scanning the scene. The moment they saw my furious expression and the small crowd of neighbors, they knew this wasn't a simple HOA dispute. The first officer, Officer Daniels, approached me. You reported a theft? Yes, I said immediately. My HOA president, Karen, broke into my yard and stole my golden retriever. I have security footage of her doing it, and she's keeping him locked up in her backyard. The officer's face hardened. Do you have the footage ready? I opened my phone and pulled up the video. Crystal clear. It showed Karen sneaking into my backyard, unhooking Max's leash and leading him away. The officers exchanged looks. That's more than enough for trespassing and theft, Daniel said, nodding to his partner. Let's go talk to her. We all followed as they walked up to Karen's house. One officer knocked firmly on the door. It took a moment, but when Karen finally opened it, she put on the fakest smile I'd ever seen. Officers, she chirped. What a surprise. How can I help you? Daniels didn't play along. We received a report that you have unlawfully taken a resident's dog. We need to see your backyard. Karen's expression didn't even flinch. Oh, that's just a misunderstanding, she said sweetly. The HOA rules state that all community pets must align with a neighborhood aesthetic, and this gentleman's overgrown beast was in violation. Officer Daniels cut her off. Ma'am, HOA rules do not override state law. You do not have the right to confiscate someone else's pet. Step aside. Karen's smile twitched. Well, I would love to comply, but you see, I don't have the dog anymore. My blood turned to ice. What do you mean, you don't have him anymore? I barked. She shrugged. I made arrangements to relocate him to a more suitable environment. I stepped forward, but Officer Daniels put a hand on my shoulder, silently telling me to stay calm. Then he turned back to Karen. Let's try this again, he said, his voice firm. We have surveillance footage of you entering this man's yard and taking his dog. That's theft and trespassing. If you don't immediately show us where the dog is, we will arrest you on the spot. Karen's fake confidence cracked. She suddenly looked nervous. You can't do that, she protested. This is a private HOA matter. The police have no jurisdiction. Daniels pulled out his handcuffs. You sure about that? Karen's eyes widened. This is ridiculous. You're treating me like a criminal. Daniels didn't budge. Where's the dog? Karen swallowed hard. Then she finally sighed. Fine. He's in the backyard. The officers pushed past her. I followed. As we rounded the side of the house, my heart clenched when I saw Max. He was locked inside a small chain-link kennel, pacing nervously, his tail wagging weakly when he saw me. He looked confused and scared. Max, I called. He immediately perked up, rushing to the edge of the fence. Karen huffed. See? He's perfectly safe. Daniel shot her a glare. You're lucky he's unharmed, or you'd be facing animal cruelty charges. The other officer unlocked the kennel, and the second Max was free, he sprinted toward me, nearly knocking me over with his excitement. I held him tight, feeling the relief wash over me. But just as I thought this nightmare was over, Jessica spoke up. What about Mrs. Henderson's dog? She asked. Officer Daniels turned to Karen. Ma'am, have you taken any other animals from residents? Karen clamped her mouth shut. Daniels sighed. That's what I thought. He pulled out his radio. Dispatch, we need a search warrant request for suspected multiple pet thefts. Karen's face drained of color. You can't be serious. We'll see about that, Daniels said. I had won the battle, but I had a feeling Karen was about to lose the war. Because this wasn't just about Max. This was about every pet she had ever taken. And when the police searched her garage, they found something much, much worse. The relief of getting Max back lasted only a moment before Jessica's words sank in. Karen had likely stolen other pets. And if she had taken Mrs. Henderson's missing dog, how many others were there? Officer Daniels wasted no time. After calling in a warrant request, he turned back to Karen. Ma'am, you need to come with us while we investigate this further. Karen, still in shock for being caught, snapped back to life. This is a witch hunt. I was simply ensuring compliance. These animals were violating. You were stealing pets, Daniels interrupted. And we're going to find out exactly how many. Karen's mouth opened and closed, as if scrambling for another excuse, but it was over. The other officer, Simmons, stayed behind while Daniels escorted Karen to the police car. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered by now, whispering amongst themselves as Karen was handcuffed and placed in the back seat. She finally got what she deserved, Mark muttered beside me. But I wasn't celebrating yet. Not until I knew the full extent of what she had done. Officer Simmons approached me. We'll need access to your footage for the report. If you can send it to us, that would help. Of course, I said, already pulling up the file. Simmons nodded, then turned to the house. While we wait on the warrant, let's do a quick walk around. If she's been keeping animals somewhere other than the yard, we might get lucky. Jessica, Mark, and I followed as he led us around the side of the house. As we rounded the back corner, Mark suddenly stopped. Wait. I turned to see what he was looking at, and my stomach dropped. There was a side door to Karen's garage, secured with 3 different locks. The door was weathered, scratched up, as if something or multiple things had clawed at it. Simmons frowned. That's unusual. Without hesitation, he tried the handle. Locked, of course. He radioed Daniels. We might have something in the garage. Door is secured with multiple locks and shows signs of damage. A reply came back quickly. Copy that. Stay put. Warrant should be approved any minute now. I swallowed hard. If Karen had gone through the trouble of triple locking something, that meant whatever was inside, she didn't want anyone to see. It took another 30 minutes for officers to return with a signed search warrant. By then, half the neighborhood had gathered, whispering amongst themselves as officers prepared to force entry. Daniels approached with bolt cutters. We'll be careful, but I need you all to stand back. We stepped away, holding our breath as he snapped off the locks. The second the last one fell to the ground, Daniels pushed the door open. And what we saw inside was worse than any of us expected. The stench hit us first, a mix of dirt, urine, and stale food. Inside, lined against the walls, were 5 metal crates. All of them had dogs inside. My stomach twisted into knots. Some of the dogs were whimpering, their tails tucked between their legs. Others were motionless, their eyes filled with fear. And in the crate closest to the door, shaking, was Mrs. Henderson's missing dog, Charlie. Jessica gasped. Oh my God. Mark clenched his fists. That psycho was running a HOA pet prison. Officer Daniels immediately stepped inside. We need animal control and additional units here now. We've got multiple stolen pets on site. Another officer ran to his patrol car to make the call. Meanwhile, Simmons carefully checked the dogs, his expression hardening. They're all dehydrated, he muttered. She wasn't just keeping them. She wasn't even taking care of them. That's when Mrs. Henderson arrived. She had heard the commotion and must have been told by a neighbor what was happening. The second she saw Charlie in the crate, she burst into tears. "Charlie!" she cried, rushing forward. Charlie's ears perked up. The moment an officer unlatched his crate, he bolted out, leaping into Mrs. Henderson's arms. The poor woman collapsed onto the grass, sobbing as she held him close. "I thought I'd never see you again," she whispered. Neighbors watched in shock and horror as the reality of what Karen had done finally set in. She hadn't just stolen pets. She had kidnapped them, held them in filthy conditions, and refused to return them to their rightful owners. Daniels turned to me. "Thanks to your footage, we have her on trespassing, theft, and now multiple counts of animal cruelty. She won't be getting out of this one." I exhaled, finally allowing myself to feel some relief. Good. As animal control arrived, the officers carefully removed each dog from crates, scanning them for microchips. Each one belonged to someone in the neighborhood. Karen had been doing this for months. And when her house was searched further, officers found HOA documents with a handwritten list of animals she planned to remove. Max's name was on it. So was Charlie's. And at the top of the list, under a section labeled Next Removals, were at least 3 more names. Karen had been planning to steal even more dogs. The neighborhood was outraged. By the time the officers drove her away, Karen wasn't just facing a HOA vote for removal, she was facing serious jail time. But as she was shoved into the patrol car, she screeched at us one last time. "You're all going to pay for this. I was protecting the community. You'll see. You'll see." The door slammed shut. And just like that, Karen was gone. The next week, the HOA held an emergency vote. Karen was removed permanently, and her community aesthetic nonsense completely wiped from the rulebook. Max was safe. Charlie was home. The neighborhood pets were finally free. And Karen, she was sitting in a jail cell, exactly where she belonged. What do you think? Did Karen get what she deserved? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever had a nightmare HOA experience, share your story. If you enjoyed this one, don't forget to like and subscribe for more insane HOA horror stories.